everyone, and welcome to our Women in Leadership Global Leadership Exchange podcast. I am Akimi Jones, and with me today I have.
Hi, I'm Joy Brunson Subiga, and we are here at the match with the theme of Ideas to Action, inspiring leaders to mobilize collective solutions.
Over the past few days, women leaders from different backgrounds, sectors, and countries, we all came together with one common goal: to learn from one another, challenge one another, and explore how we can continue advancing women in leadership. Today, we are reflecting on that experience and sharing some of the most meaningful insights that emerged. So, hey, match attendees, how y'all doing? Have we had fun with each other over the past 2 days?
Yeah.
Yes. We learned a lot from one another.
Yes.
We got some good takeaways.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about it. What inspired you most about participating in our match? Who wants to take it? Who wants to take that question? You take it?
Thanks, Akimi. I'm Lisa Jackson. Yeah. I think the thing that the thing that inspired me the most is a kind of kinship, being among other leaders in this space and women leaders in particular, knowing in large part that I'm not alone in the experience, but also there's a lot of wisdom that we carry that we get to share with each other, and that's inspiring to me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Who else?
I'm Joanna Good, and I think what stuck with me is both the ability to learn from so many great women and also to feel that I've got something to share too. So that reciprocity and learning really stuck with me after these few days.
For me, inspiring part was meeting other like-minded individuals, especially from gender perspective, and feeding off their energy, sharing mine, and really thinking at what is missing from the leadership space and where can we bring our own insights to it.
Yeah, I would agree with Mina. A lot of what you just said really resonates with me, and I think it is that being in a safe place with other women leaders and being able to share some of the common challenges that we experience and how we overcome them, and how we still have many to overcome, and not all the answers, but I think there's a real strength in sharing and that collective and moving forward with grace.
And I'm Ann Casper, and I think even though we're coming from different sectors, different situations, different person situations, we have more in common than not. And it was also because we're in a room full of women. I felt it just flowed naturally. We don't need to explain everything to each other. There was a lot of grace given to everybody. And so we gave a lot of openness and grace. And it's sometimes just a gift to be with women. And I really appreciate everyone today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. You know, when we think back on our match, was there anything that surprised us that came out of the conversations that we had?
For me, how competitive everybody was when picking up teams, very detail oriented. It was a collective, but same times I saw that individual energy and very sincere buy-in into what we are creating. So that was a very pleasant surprise for me.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name's Carly Shears. I'm a GLE Lived Experience Council member, and what surprised me was how many similarities I identified with the other women leaders. I thought being a lived experience leader that my leadership journey would be different, but I was pleasantly surprised that I found so many common elements and common ground.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? All right. Were there any common themes that emerged regardless of where we came from in the globe? What were some of the common themes that we talked about or that we've all experienced that sort of bubbled up like oil and water during our conversations?
I think the most profound theme that just rose up for me was the sense of emotional load how much we carry, and I would say how much we carry as women, whether you're a mother or you're caring for a parent or caring for your team or what have you. There's an emotional load that comes with leadership, and particularly as a woman in leadership, I think that really stood out for me.
I do want to echo what you just said and thank all the women in the room really for acknowledging the emotional load that we carry. Like there were a ton of things we identified that are barriers to all of us, and we came up with great strategies. They were brilliant, weren't they? Yes. And they, and I think we solved half the world's problems, except that at the end of the day, we are the people who step up for our children, for our parents, for our families. And those of us who are lucky enough to have partners that equally share that responsibility, I think we all recognize the emotional burden we all carry, you know, regardless of those really exceptional partners and spouses and whoever. And it wears on women in leadership. It makes us tired. And it makes us have to think more strategically about what those strategies can be that both fill us back up, but also keep the women around us filled up, especially in a leadership role. And those are tricky waters to like get through on a regular basis. So, yeah.
Are all of the many hats that we wear as women leaders, I think we're master jugglers, right? We're master jugglers. Yeah.
I was really found it great that we discussed that none of us got to our spot as a leader on our own. Mm-hmm. And we could all think back to that person that picked us up, that inspired us, that told us we could do it, that trusted us to try. And I think sharing those stories inspires us to make sure we're doing that for someone else, for the next generation. I think that was a really important conversation that we had in these last 2 days.
Absolutely.
And another thing that came up was, what is leadership? Is it for power, or is it bringing your emotional load and understanding the emotional load of others? That's authentic power as we're leading. So we talked about, again, what is power, what is leadership, and what is it to lead from emotional intelligence?
Thank you, Anne. I'm going to piggyback on what you said, because when I'm doing my mentorship and I'm talking to leaders within our organization, one of the things I say often is one of the most important things we can do as leaders, women leaders, men leaders, is to put a ladder down for someone else and pull people forward. Like, yes, it's our job to do our leadership duties, right, for whatever organization we're working for per our job description. But our most important role is to pull people forward, take the knowledge and experiences that we have had and make them better for those that come after us. And so I know that in our conversations, we talked a lot about identifying barriers and challenges. And while our experiences may differ, many of the challenges and opportunities women face in leadership are remarkably similar across industries. So as we shared our experiences, what were some of the barriers that surfaced most consistently? What were the things that were like, oh, wow, you deal with that too? Oh, we're struggling with that also. What were some of the things that sort of started to bubble up for us once we started having these conversations?
The work situation is set up now was not set up for women having children, getting pregnant, right? I think some of the women talked about that, how they actually got jobs while they were pregnant. They didn't know they could even apply for jobs. So as we're going as natural human beings on our lives, the systems, it's a time to shift the system so it shifts towards the real human lives and not towards one way of being that has forgotten women for a long time.
It was like a perceived barrier, right? So for when these individuals were telling those stories, there was this perception, because we've been fortunately programmed to say, well, if I'm pregnant, then unfortunately I can't do it. But these individuals were fortunate to have good leaders in their corner that said, one, this is a part of your life. By all means, we're not going to disrespect that. I know you fit this role. It'll be here when you get back. And that's a part of having good leadership in place that is allowing you to be your authentic, whole human self at work. And unfortunately, those things are far and few between. but that's why we're all here, right? Because we want to make it not far and few between. So why do we think that some of these barriers continue to persist despite some of the progress, I'll put air quotes, progress we have made? Why do we think we still have these issues?
If I can speak to that, so for me, it's I think we still think that way because there's still incidents that happen in our life where the barrier is real. And even, nearing the end of my career, I more recently, did come up against a gender barrier. And it saddened me. And I felt that, I had the right skills and was the right person for the job. I do have my own company, and we talked about one of the barriers that I think is around self-directed leadership. That's one of the key aspects of leadership is being able to have that inner voice that says, yes, you can. And it helps when you're surrounded by other women leaders. But when you see women sometimes not being able to break the glass, it can be self-defeating and change the narrative in your head. And so this is why these types of gatherings are really important, is to remind ourselves and to recharge and rethink and change the narrative.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Ma'am?
That's okay. I think one of the things we talked about the emotional load a lot and being allowed to, ask for help and those sorts of things. But I think a lot of women, their desire is still to prioritize the things like their family and the care for their family. And often leadership roles don't allow for that time, right? And those decisions have to be made around which one to prioritize, and especially when families are younger or the other end with aging parents that need care. I know that a lot of women that I've worked with want to prioritize those things, and that can be really challenging to balance work and leadership. And I know that the women I've met here strive to do a good job, right? And don't want to give less than. And when you're fully committed to two things, it's almost impossible to not give less than. And so I think that's one of the barriers that's still there. And how do we get around it? I don't know. That's one of the things that we need to work through still, I think.
It's that balance and harmony. She knows I'm going to call on her because I said harmony. So we're going to give the mic to Joy for this one because she does a great job of explaining it's not always about balance. It actually rarely is about balance, and it is more so about that harmonious sort of relationship between all of the tasks and hats and things that we wear. So Joy, balance versus harmony.
Well, I think you explained it pretty well. I don't know if I have to come behind that and explain it again, but I'm a mom too, and a leader in my organization. And I found just early on that I couldn't do everything and give the same amount of energy to everything. And so I started looking at what the options were. And in looking through things, I discovered this concept of thinking of it more like an orchestra. And when you have a really beautiful song, there isn't really like one area that's leading all the time. You could have your violins at some times, you can have your drums at others, you can have your trumpets at others. Like it's about what needs to be brought forward at that point in time. And everything, if anyone goes to the orchestra, like is not competing. It just kind of flows extremely well. And so from that, and trying to get out of the thought process and the guilt of trying to balance everything, I've moved to trying to harmonize everything. I'm not perfect at it, But there are days like today where I'm working more than I'm at home. And there are times when I'm at home and I can only work like a couple hours because there are things that I have to prioritize there. But at the end of the day, everything is flowing together in harmony. And I don't have that same guilt of I have to be 100% at every role that I have. So that's what I try to do.
Sounds like every role has its turn in the
So,
forefront.
I think there was a question asked. If I could just really jump in to say, we place so much responsibility on women to coming up with those answers as individual. So here we talk about it's the system we have to take a look, which wants women to reproduce, but then penalize them for their, contributions rather than recognizing those contributions. So in Canada, the women's advocacy organizations have worked hard with the federal government to put a gender-based analysis in every policy that they or service they deliver. So one thing we learned from the stats came out through that gender-based analysis is that the woman who took 4 to 5 years, of children in their like late 20s or early 30s, when it comes to the Canada pension plan at the retirement of 65, they did not progress as fast. They did not make as much money. So because of their gender, they were penalized financially at the retirement. Second was there's a data again showing that we always say the children, it's 5 years, of the baby's growth is really important to create a stable youth and the education system. But then you're penalizing women for staying at home. And also, if you want women to go back after 6 months, what happened? So now we have 18 months parental leave. So anybody could take, whether it's a husband or wife, during that period. So again, that came from the gender-based analysis. I think as leaders, we constantly have to not put onus on women to come up with a solution. It's a state responsibility to look at those systemically, which is, discriminating a specific gender. And then organizations have to really implement them with full heart. To me, that is a barrier, but same times that is an example of solution that we look at from the gender and inclusion and accessibility lenses to make sure one particular part is non-discrimination because of their needs.
Unfortunately, it's a common thread that, very unfortunate, that the marginalized populations are usually the ones tasked or asked, so how do we fix it? Right? It's kind of unfair to ask us how to fix it when we are also the ones enduring. You're right, it is more of a systemic issue. So thank you for bringing that up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to build on what Joy was saying about this idea of work-life harmony. Realizing that sometimes the thinking of is, well, she's a pretty good leader in spite of being a mother. And there's power in shifting that I'm actually a better leader because I am a mother.
That part.
And I'm a better mother, daughter, sister, community member because of my leadership experience, that one doesn't detract from another.
Right.
They can actually really augment each other.
Very complimentary. Absolutely.
I had one final note to add about kind of going back to barriers in general, but I'm thinking about sitting in spaces that are not necessarily predominantly female, and how in those spaces I often felt like I had to be quiet, or I was, kind of either it was told directly or just by, sheer ignoring of here's the comment and we're just going to bypass that and go in this direction in those spaces. And I realized from that, I took away from that kind of an internalized silence. And I think that's an important thing to recognize as well, that we have to, I would say collectively, but for myself, I have to be mindful about the stories I'm telling myself about who I am in these spaces. You know, am I really someone who doesn't have a voice, or am I just not willing to have the courage to use my voice in a space that feels scary? So I just wanted to call that out. I know we didn't talk about that directly, but as we're talking, that
deprogramming what the system has placed into us.
Can I respond to Lisa for a sec
Sure.
too? What we did chat about is, and that's why it's so important that collectively we cheer each other on, right? And that did surface. And I think leaving this space, I think for me, that's one of the takeaways, right? Is, you know, as often as we can, and when the situation calls for it, right? We need to be there for each other. It's really important.
I just want to say, and I'm observing how this was run in the past 2 days with Akimi, right, and Joy. Make sure you're saying them right. It was really watching you two flow with each other as well. It was non-hierarchical. And I think that set the example for the rest of us to be comfortable, where you also created space and time to listen when people didn't have the answers right away. We didn't have to come up really quickly. You gave that buffer for all of us.
Thank you.
Okay. We talked about having the need to have grit and grace, and sometimes being a leader can be quite isolating. And I think this experience demonstrates the importance of women coming together and supporting each other and continuing to build trust and credibility with allies to support us, and that feeling of connection and collaboration.
Absolutely. It's something to be said about being able to pour back into one another. And it was Jennifer that talked about pouring into each other's cups, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. Eventually a past due bank account will shut down. And so we want to make sure that we are making good deposits, not only into the people that look to us for support, but who is depositing into us so that we can continue to deposit into others. So I agree, having these places and spaces to have these gatherings are important. So as we transition here, which barrier do we believe currently, just from what we have discussed, because I'm sure there are many, have the greatest impact on women's leadership journeys today, based on our discussion and time together?
I have a cheeky answer.
We like cheeky. We like cheeky.
To borrow my friend's term, cheeky. There's not enough women in higher levels of leadership.
I also think that answer is generational. I think that, you're dealing with a bunch of women who are in leadership roles already. I think we had a lot of conversations about younger women coming into the workplace, whether they're millennials or Gen Zers, and that many of us have poured our hearts and souls into raising them, whether they're our own or they're, in our circles. And we want them to show up authentically as we have hoped for them, like hoped the workplace and the world will be for them. And so I think we're a group of women that are probably still unloading some of the things that are, we were trained with, whatever it was, whether it came from religion or just your culture, whatever. We've had a lot of conversations about that. And that looks different for every one of us, but there are generations of women, I'll claim myself as one, that have gone through like a deprogramming as a leader. I watch my daughter show up and I'm like, ooh, girl, do it, And I think that is important for us all to recognize, that they don't show up as burdened as us, but we could burden them if they walk into the world and we put these, biases on them about their age or their voice or their ideas. And I think we spent a little bit of time on that, but I that is important, I think, for all of us. Everybody's nodding for the podcasters, right? It is really important to have spent this time teaching our girls that they're leaders and not clipping their wings in any way, shape, or form. And I think then that answer becomes different, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that. I do think you have a generation of people, even though we're slightly different in age, but we kind of still are working through our stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm just super hopeful my kid and everybody else's kid here is less working through stuff. And we set up culture, work, whether that's work or culture or whatever, that lets them be their true selves faster, quicker, cleaner than what we've talked about. Yeah.
I want to, so Mary, hey, Mary girl, you couldn't be here with us, but I'm shout you out. So Mary, on the first day, she told a story about her daughter, and how she wanted to always hold the door open for her little daughter. And that is, in essence, what we are wanting to do for every little daughter, regardless of age, that we encounter in our leadership journey. It's what we're telling them is take up space, sis. It's okay to take up space. It's okay to stand 10 toes down in who you are. It's okay to have discernment. It's okay to give respectful but firm pushback on things that are not in alignment with who you are and the things that you believe. And so we are, again, teaching them to be stronger quicker, than what we were, and that's a blessing in and of itself. So as we're thinking about taking up space and leaving the doors open for those that come after us, what leadership qualities help women thrive despite the obstacles? Right? Because like you said, we're not changing the world overnight here. So what are some of the innate things that we might already have, or skill sets that we might need to build in order to remain, I know we don't like this R word, resilient, but in essence that's what we have to be until we truthfully see change. So what are some of the things?
Well, I think one of the things that was evident with this group was that there was a significant and sincere passion for the work that they were doing. And I think that that is something that was filling people's cup and was helping people keep that resiliency. Because when they got back to the basics of, okay, why do I choose to do this work? They could find value in it, they could find respect in it, they could find worth in it, and they could find passion in it. And because we all, each of you, as you told your story, were able to do that, I think that grounds us. It grounds us in human services to be able to say, this is why we choose to do it here. Now, we need lots of other strategies to continue to be resilient for all the hard work that is required of us. But I find that very inspiring and truthful. You all are truly passionate about why you do what you do. And that's very powerful, I think.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that it's 2026 and that the most powerful nation in the world right now is not setting a good example for women in leadership. And that did come up. I raised it a number of times, but it's real. And so resilience, and that's where the grit comes in, because it's not easy right now, and people are aware of what is happening, and it's not good, and it's putting women at a disadvantage, and we need to acknowledge that and say, keep your passion, keep your grit, and keep moving forward, right? Because there's going to be times in history where we really need to have the grit and the grace to be able to move things forward and to stay with it, because there's some nasty things happening for women right now.
You're absolutely right. There aren't great things that are happening. So what role does community play in the resiliency and supporting one another and leadership growth? And in a time where it feels like the growth is potentially being stifled, how do we continue to do it within the women in leadership community?
I'm going to answer that and the last question at the same time. And it's about, we're asking about skills, about boundaries, holding our boundaries that are healthy for us. Because when we're healthy, we can do better for everybody else. And in community, how do we help people hold their own boundaries and pick up when we need to and help organize so those things are taken care of while people are keeping healthy in their own boundaries? Thank you.
If I could add, I don't know where does my thinking start, but it's unlearning what a woman's role is and not pass our understanding to our younger generation. That woman has to balance relationship, work, kids. We need to build a pipeline of younger women who are very competitive, academically more successful than boys. We have seen the data. Just need to support them, not pull them back, saying, yeah, but when you get married, still it's your responsibility that house is running smoothly. So I think that unlearning we have to do, and making sure our pipeline coming up is supported with that thinking. And third, I don't have a daughter. I only have son. And I was committed from the day one that he understands that what woman's role is, how he can support and show up, not only for his mom, but for his future partner. So if we keep learning and talking among women, men are not going to change. They equally have to learn that leadership space belongs to all of them, is the best talent win, but same time thinking need to be 2026. It cannot be older.
Thank you.
I just want to echo that and recognize that not all families are made up of men and women, and you know what I mean, like that we have a very diverse way in which we raise children. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that we've talked a lot about our daughters because this is a women's leadership group, but it is truly the sons that are being raised that will be so impactful. And we have a real crisis with our boys right now. I mean, they really are struggling with where their places in this space, right? Where do they belong? How do they fit? What's the job market going to be? Those are all things that as women leaders we have to take very, very seriously, because that can go really awry if we leave our boys, our young men, out of the equation of what does women in leadership look like. That is not something women should just turn it back on, right? Like it's something we should claim as our space as well. Think about it with our young boys and do proactive things that give them opportunities. So as a culture, that next generation is raised up in a way that is really better than we are. That's what we're talking about, is like, how do we do this better? And you just can't leave the boys out of that in any way. Yeah.
Can you see so many violence happening, mass shootings happening, because men did not want to hear no, what they thought, women in engineering should be just massacred down. So we also need to create that safe space by having that dialogue with boys and girls both.
I think it's important to mention that even though we are a women in leadership collaborative, we're not women in leadership absent of men in leadership.
Right.
And a part of our segue, but I do want to make sure I hear what you need to say, is what role do allies play in advancing leadership equity in general? And so that will be our next question, but I wanted to honor.
Well, I just, going back to the idea of community and the importance of community and the shared experience of being women in leadership and the importance of relationship has really been emphasized, I think, the past 2 days. And that the idea of these shared experiences sometimes gets lost in our day to day when we're out there doing the work that we do. And to leave space for coming back together to share share that together and really nurture the relationships in our life, because I think that's what will make the biggest difference in terms of leading, like demonstrating and showing our sons, our daughters, the Gen Zers that are coming up, all those people, that nurturing relationships with people is really what makes the best leaders.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, going back, there was a part that when you said about unlearning, and one of the pieces that stuck out for me over the last 2 days was when we were talking about our thought process of how many seats there are at a table, and how that can create competition versus bringing others in. And so I just wanted to add that into this conversation as we're talking about other women leaders, our community, our sons, our daughters, all of that, having that kind of unlearning what those seats mean, and being able to bring individuals into that room, no matter age or gender or experience. All of that is really more about providing those opportunities. But that was just something that I was thinking about when everybody was talking. Like, it really fit for me with this conversation of being part of the solution, and being able to start opening those doors.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joy. As we segue into our closing here, we're transitioning from moving from awareness to accountability now. How do we and how can we intentionally create pathways for future women leaders? And this includes what role allies play in advancing that leadership equity. So it's a two-parter.
I think allyship is really important. If I look back at my journey 40 years ago, for a new immigrant and newly disabled woman in Canada, I couldn't find any mentors who will look like me, who can guide me what path I have to take. So I acknowledge that there were white, able-bodied women who mentored me. There were racialized men who showed me the career pathway and support. And I think what we can change is that intentionally we build spaces for younger generation, but again, looking, in my personal experience, looking at those who are at margins and not just always bring solutions which work for 80% in the middle, and then intentionally put resources to lift them up, create a pipeline that nobody's talking about. Maybe quality matters versus quantity. And I think that is a very intentional focus of, when I choose who am I mentoring, who am I sponsoring, it's a very intentional efforts to those who have no, come from broken homes, or those who come from where third generation is on disability or welfare, creating those cycles. Because I know for others, maybe there are more programs, but for these youth, and especially women, they are told your role is to just get education and have babies, right? Financial empowerment is not
And-
about
And what you're saying, Mina, is it's so important that we continue to invest in the DEI education and putting it into action. And I think there, certainly in Canada, there's been movement, and there still is, even with the work that I do around human-centered design. People are, it's including everyone at the table. There's that movement. And we know that's happening around the world. It's important that we continue to make sure that that is a priority, regardless of where you live.
As leaders, it's our responsibility to develop other leaders. And one of the common threads that came through our conversations was that reciprocity.
I was just thinking, you were asking about allies. How can allies help us? Allies can help us by watching us how we work together, which is generally women try not to compete against each other. We try to lift each other up in community because it goes back biology that our oxytocin is raised when we lift community up. And that's just where we're coming from a biological standpoint. And competition is important, but as you lift the community up, as women up, you actually lift everybody up. And that's been proven through micro enterprise in all kinds of countries. When you lift women up, you're lifting the boys, the men, and then it's just a better society and all. So let's all work together.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. As we close out this great conversation, and attendees, friends, family, thank you for participating. The last question is, after this match, what does leading with grit and grace mean to you?
The first thing that comes to me is just connection, which is kind of an interesting thing that floats up for me. I work at home. I work alone. My job is, somewhat in isolation. And I feel like having the courage to have grit and grace is also having the courage to be connected, which is something that I'm relearning. So
thank you, Lisa.
I feel excited to allow yourself to continue to work incredibly hard. But I think some of the grace is also to ourselves, not just to each other or to the people that we're leading, but we talked a lot in our conversations about being authentically you. So know who you are and lean into that person that you are. But you also get to offer some grace to your own self. And that will give you space to be able to have more resilience on a tough day. So I'm excited about continuing to work hard and not just offering grace to others, but to be, it's okay to just be yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think that building on what you're saying, there's an opportunity in that also for how are we teaching the next generation of women leaders, that they're modeling us and they're going to mimic what they see, not just what we tell them. So if we're talking to them about work-life harmony, but we're not demonstrating it, if we're talking to them about filling their cups, but we're not doing it ourselves, then we're becoming hollow.
It's that moving away from do as I say, not as I do mentality.
I'm just thinking about every single person here and all the stories of grit you have told. I've learned a lot in the past couple of days, no matter what country you're from, where you're coming from, leadership, and bringing those stories forth into my own life and the lives of others I've worked with in the United States as we move on.
Thank you. Anybody else?
For me, really always remembering the importance of networking, which doesn't come naturally to us sometimes. I know men, that's how, they built their worth and their opportunities. So remember to say good morning to all of you. And also say, hey, need help. Absolutely. When I do need to talk to others. So I think just making intentional effort to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
And lean on you.
Absolutely. A community. Yeah. All right. So as we close out, throughout our discussions, one thing became evidently clear. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up with courage when challenges arise, extending grace to ourselves and others, and continuing to move forward even when the path isn't easy. And I think we can all say the path, respectfully, is never easy. So that is what it's meant when we say lead with grit and grace. So our challenge to you, our listeners, this week, identify one way you can show support for another leader's growth. Sometimes the most meaningful change begins with one single action. So with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for traveling out here and spending time with us and participating. And we are looking forward to carrying these discussions throughout our Women in Leadership Collaborative. Bye.
Bye.
Good job, squad.
Hey, everybody, hold.
Oh.
Make sure
Okay.
everybody-